Buckle up, everyone, because today we're taking a deep dive into one of the most chilling conspiracy theories out there, the Dulce Base.
Ooh, yeah, this one is a classic.
We're going to be sifting through a mountain of accounts, rumors, and, well, let's be honest, some pretty wild stories surrounding this supposed top-secret underground facility in Dulce, New Mexico.
So many layers to this one.
Our mission, if you choose to accept it, is to unearth the core claims of this theory, try to connect the dots, and understand why this particular conspiracy theory just won't die.
You know, it's interesting. The thing that really draws people to the Dulce Base theory is the fact that it's tied to these real-world events that are, let's face it, pretty disturbing on their own. It adds this extra layer of mystery.
Right. I mean, we're talking bizarre cattle mutilations, people vanishing without a trace, and even some folks claiming they've come face-to-face with extraterrestrials. It's like something straight out of a sci-fi thriller, but some people believe it's all too real.
It's definitely got that X-Files vibe.
Totally. So to kick things off, let's rewind back to the 1970s. That's when a wave of strange cattle deaths around Dulce, New Mexico really put this place on the map. Ranchers were finding their livestock dead. And not just dead, but mutilated in these unexplainable, almost surgical-like ways.
Yeah, the mutilations were what really caught everyone's attention.
It's creepy, right? We're talking about animals with organs missing, zero blood at the scene, no footprints, no signs of struggle. It's like something out of a horror movie.
It was like something had just beamed those organs right out of them.
Precisely. And this wasn't isolated to just one ranch or even one area. These incidents were happening across several states. People were freaked out, and understandably so. There had to be an explanation.
Yeah.
And that's where Paul Benowitz enters the picture.
Ah, yes, Paul Benowitz. He was convinced he'd stumbled onto something big.
He was a local businessman who claimed he was picking up these weird signals using his radio equipment. And he was convinced, absolutely convinced, that these signals were alien communications emanating from an underground base near Dulce.
And his theory didn't stop there. Benowitz also suggested that the aliens were using cattle for experiments in this hidden base. So he was connecting these cattle mutilations to this even bigger, even more sinister story.
Wow. Okay, so you're telling me that there's a chance, even a slight chance, that these cattle mutilations were all part of some larger alien agenda unfolding in a secret underground base. That's a pretty wild leap, isn't it?
Oh, it's a huge leap for sure. And things get even weirder from there. Benowitz's claims initially started gaining some traction, but then, poof, he disappears. Later, he's found in a mental institution diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia.
So was he really onto something, or was it all a result of his mental health? It's impossible to say for sure. His disappearance definitely throws a wrench into the whole thing.
Absolutely. It's one of those things that make you wonder, what if there's more to this story?
Right. It's a question that haunts you. And that brings us to another pivotal figure in the Dulce Base saga, Phil Schneider. Now, he was a self-proclaimed government engineer who claimed he had firsthand experience with the Dulce Base. And this is where things take a pretty dramatic turn.
Yeah, Schneider's story really takes the Dulce Base theory from just a strange local legend to this full-blown, terrifying conspiracy.
So Phil Schneider claimed he was involved in building underground bases, Dulce included, for the U.S. government. But then, in 1995, he drops this bombshell. He gives this presentation where he describes this violent encounter with gray aliens at Dulce back in 1979. And he didn't just vaguely allude to it. His account was detailed, like intensely detailed.
Yeah, it's almost like he was trying to make people see it, like he needed them to believe him.
Exactly. He talks about deep drilling operations, stumbling upon this massive underground cavern, and then bam, out of nowhere, 3 alien beings appear. 2 small grays and 1 much larger one.
Like something out of a nightmare.
Totally. According to Schneider, what starts as a tense standoff quickly descends into a full-blown firefight. He says he was hit by some kind of alien weapon, which resulted in 2 of his fingers being severed. He had burn marks on his chest and feet and said he suffered from all these chronic health problems because of it.
It's a pretty horrific story. And he doesn't stop there, right? He goes on to claim that 66 people died in that confrontation and that the government forced him to stay silent about the whole thing.
Can you even imagine the pressure? To know that you were part of something so unbelievable, so terrifying, and to be told you can never, ever breathe a word of it.
It would eat you alive. It would make you question your own sanity.
Absolutely. But then it gets even darker. Schneider's friend, Ron Rummel, who was supposedly another government insider, is found dead. Very suspicious circumstances. And then, just 6 months after going public with his story, Schneider's found dead in his apartment. His death is ruled as suicide, but there were physical limitations that made it seem almost impossible for him to have taken his own life.
Yeah, those details are hard to ignore. Makes you wonder if someone wanted to make sure he stayed quiet permanently.
It certainly does. So, was Schneider silenced to keep him from revealing more about the Dulce Base? Did the government orchestrate a cover-up to hide its involvement with extraterrestrials? It's a lot to process, and there's still more to uncover. But before we go any further, we need to hear from someone else who claims to have inside knowledge of Dulce, Thomas Costello.
Yeah, Costello's story is interesting because it tries to reconcile some of the discrepancies between Benowitz and Schneider's accounts.
So Costello is another alleged security officer at Dulce, and he described it as this 7-level facility. Humans occupied the upper levels, while aliens were on the lower levels. He claimed that, at first, there was actually cooperation between the two, focusing on the exchange of technology.
Kind of like a weird underground science fair.
I guess so.
Yeah.
But according to Costello, things went south pretty quickly. The aliens ramped up the cattle mutilations and even started abducting humans for their own experiments. It all sounds incredibly sinister.
It does, and it makes you wonder, what were they hoping to achieve?
Right. What was the end game? Costello then went on to describe this raid that took place in 1979. The military tried to rescue the abducted humans, but it was a disaster. Heavy casualties. And that's supposedly what led to the severing of ties with the aliens.
This 1979 raid seems to be a turning point in the Dulce Base story, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It's interesting, too, because Costello's account might actually tie in with Schneider's encounter with the aliens. If you think about the timing and the details, it's possible that Schneider's firefight was part of diversionary tactic during that botched raid.
It would certainly make sense. A coordinated effort to create chaos and confusion while another team attempts a rescue.
So are we starting to get a clearer picture of what might have happened at Dulce? Or are these accounts just reinforcing each other without really providing any concrete proof? We'll dive deeper into those questions in the next part of our deep dive. All right, so we're back, and we've heard some seriously wild stories about the Dulce Base. But now it's time to put on our skeptical hats. We got to take a hard look at what we've actually got.
Right. We need to ask the tough questions here. We've got these fascinating, detailed accounts from Benowitz, Schneider, and Costello, but there's one big glaring issue. Where's the proof? I mean, we're talking about a massive secret underground base. There should be something, right?
I know, right? It's weird. You'd think there'd be some physical evidence, something tangible. Photographs of this place, some alien artifacts, maybe even some official documents that just, slip through the cracks.
You think so? And of course, some people will say, well, that government is just really, really good at covering things up.
Yeah, I've heard that argument. They say the evidence is out there, but they've wiped it all clean, scrubbed it from existence.
I mean, it's definitely possible. There are government agencies that are in the business of keeping secrets, especially when it comes to, national security.
Right. But think about the scale of a cover-up like this. We're talking about a multi-level underground base, aliens, potentially hundreds of witnesses. Keeping something that big under wraps, that takes some serious effort.
It would be an absolutely massive undertaking. It makes you wonder if it's even possible to keep that many secrets for that long. The more people involved, the harder it is to contain the truth. Someone always talks eventually.
True. But what about Schneider's injuries? Those were real, weren't they? It's not like he just made those up.
Oh, his injuries were real, no doubt about it. And they definitely make his story more, shall we say, compelling. But, there could be other explanations that don't involve, alien weaponry.
Okay, so are you saying he could have fabricated the whole thing, just completely made it up?
I'm not saying that definitively. It's possible he embellished certain details, maybe exaggerated parts of his story.
Right. I mean, people do that sometimes, right? Maybe he was looking for attention, or maybe he thought he could, profit from his claims.
It's not unheard of, but then again, it's hard to imagine someone concocting such an elaborate story, especially knowing the risks involved. He put himself out there, made himself a target.
Absolutely. And let's not forget about his friend Ron Rummel, the guy who died under those mysterious circumstances. And then Schneider himself ends up dead just months after going public with his story.
Those are two deaths that are really hard to just brush aside as coincidences. It raises those questions about a possible cover-up again. Did someone want to silence them? Were they a threat to someone?
It's hard not to think that way. It all seems so suspicious. But I guess we have to be careful about connecting the dots without considering other possibilities, right?
Absolutely. We can't let our desire for a good story cloud our judgment. We need to be critical, examine all the angles. It's important to remember that the Dulce Base theory really emerged during a time when UFOs and government conspiracies were, well, they were all the rage. The 70s, the 80s, tons of UFO sightings. Movies like Close Encounters of the Third Kind were huge. People were primed to believe.
So you're saying the Dulce Base story is kind of a product of its time, a reflection of the anxieties and fascinations of that era? Like maybe people were just more inclined to accept these kinds of stories because, aliens and government secrets were already on their minds.
It's definitely a possibility, but we need to be fair. The lack of physical evidence doesn't automatically debunk the whole theory.
Hold on a second. You've been saying there's no proof, no evidence. So how can you say that the lack of evidence doesn't debunk it?
Okay, good point. Let me clarify. Just because we haven't found that smoking gun, that definitive piece of evidence, doesn't automatically mean the Dulce Base doesn't exist. Absence of evidence isn't evidence of absence, right? It's subtle, but important.
Okay. I see what you're saying. It's a technicality, but it's a valid one. But if we can't rely on physical evidence or the testimonies of these people, what are we supposed to do?
Hmm?
How do we figure out what's real and what's not? It feels like we're going in circles here.
I understand the frustration. It's messy. That's where critical thinking comes in. We need to look at the motivations and the credibility of the people involved. We need to consider alternative explanations for what happened. And we need to be aware of our own biases, right? We all come to this with our own baggage, our own preconceived notions. Some people are more inclined to believe in conspiracies. Others are more skeptical. It's crucial to be aware of those biases because they can definitely affect how we interpret the information.
Absolutely. I mean, I definitely have my own opinions about all this. It's hard not to, right?
Mhm.
But putting those biases aside, what are some alternative explanations for the events surrounding the Dulce Base? Let's start with those cattle mutilations. Creepy stuff for sure. But maybe there are some more grounded explanations, things that don't require aliens.
Exactly. Predators, natural diseases, even just people playing pranks. Those could potentially explain some of the mutilations, but then again, those explanations don't really account for the surgical precision and the lack of blood, which is what makes these cases so strange.
Yeah, those details are hard to explain away. But hey, maybe there are natural processes at work that we just don't understand yet. Who knows? Our knowledge of animal decomposition, how certain predators work, it's constantly evolving.
You're right. What seems inexplicable today might have a perfectly reasonable explanation tomorrow. We've seen that happen over and over throughout history. People used to attribute all kinds of things to the supernatural simply because they didn't have the scientific knowledge to understand them. Think about lightning, disease, even mental illness. Those were once thought to be caused by supernatural forces.
It's true. It makes you realize how much our understanding of the world can change over time. But, okay, are you suggesting that we should just dismiss the Dulce Base theory as a bunch of unfounded rumors and, misinterpretations? Should we just chalk it up to the zeitgeist and move on?
Not necessarily. Skepticism is important, but it's also important to be open to the possibility that there might be more to the story than we currently understand. It's about finding that balance between questioning everything and being open to new possibilities.
Yeah, I get it. It's about being critical, but not dismissive. We should use our own judgment to figure out what's real and what's not. But man, this whole thing is giving me a headache.
And that's the nature of exploring complex and controversial topics, right? Rarely are there easy answers or clear-cut conclusions. It's more about the journey, about exploring different perspectives, about challenging our assumptions. Even if we don't come to a definitive answer, we gain a deeper understanding of the issue and how we as humans try to make sense of the unknown.
So where do we go from here? We've looked at what we know, considered other explanations, tried to keep our own biases in check. What's next in our Dulce Base exploration?
Okay, so let's shift gears a bit. Let's move away from the specifics of the Dulce Base theory and talk about the bigger picture, what this story represents, on a deeper level.
You mean, like, why does this story, even with so little evidence, continue to fascinate us? Why does it kind of creep us out? What is it about the Dulce Base that just won't let go?
It's like it's burrowed its way into our collective consciousness.
Okay, so we're back, and we've really gone deep into this whole Dulce Base thing. We've examined all the claims, tried to make sense of the lack of evidence, and now I kind of want to zoom out and think about the bigger picture. What does it all mean?
I know, right? It's like even without concrete proof, this story just keeps drawing us in. It's a little spooky, isn't it? Why do we keep coming back to it?
Yeah. It's like it has this life of its own, even though we haven't found that one piece of evidence that just slams the door shut, one way or the other.
Well, I think the Dulce Base story, true or not, taps into some really basic human anxieties. Fear of the unknown, that suspicion we all have of authority, And, maybe even that longing for something bigger than ourselves, something out there. It's all there in this story.
It's like a modern myth, right? A blend of science fiction, government conspiracies, and alien encounters. And it all gets woven together in this way that's like almost believable, but also totally terrifying. It's like it speaks to some primal fear we all have, that fear of what's hiding in the shadows, right on the edge of what we can understand.
Yeah, it's playing with those edges. And you're right, it's about hidden knowledge, experiments that should never see the light of day, and this idea that there are forces at work, forces we can't even grasp, shaping our world. It reflects our anxieties about how much we really know, about whether we're really alone out here in the universe.
And it's kind of seductive, right? That idea that there are these hidden truths, secret organizations pulling the strings from behind the curtain. It makes you want to peek behind that curtain.
I get that. It's a powerful idea, but also pretty unsettling, right? Imagine for a second that the Dulce Base story is true. What would that mean? It would mean that our government knows about aliens and they're working with them, maybe even at the expense of human safety, our freedom.
Whoa. Okay, that is a chilling thought. It makes you question everything you thought you knew about the world, about who's really in charge. And it makes you wonder, if they could hide something like that, what else are they hiding?
Right, it's a Pandora's box. And that's the thing about conspiracy theories. They make you think, make you question. If a secret underground base full of aliens is even remotely possible, what else is out there? What else don't we know?
Okay, but on the flip side, not every unknown has to be scary, right? Even if it's not true, the Dulce Base story can spark that sense of wonder, of curiosity. There's so much we don't know about the universe, and maybe stories like this encourage us to explore a little more.
Definitely. It reminds us that there's still so much out there to discover, both about the universe and about ourselves. It can spark a passion for exploration, push us to learn more, to dig deeper.
I like that. Whether or not these stories are true, they can remind us of the mysteries of the world, that we're part of something much bigger than ourselves.
Absolutely. And that's what I love about these conversations. It's not about proving or disproving. It's about engaging with these big ideas, these stories that challenge what we think we know. It's about embracing that mystery, that possibility that there's always more to learn.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into the Dulce Base, what's the one thing you really want our listeners to walk away with?
Honestly, the importance of critical thinking. When you're faced with these extraordinary claims, it's so important to approach them with a healthy dose of skepticism, but also stay open just a little bit to the possibility that there might be more to the story than meets the eye.
It's about finding that balance, right? Questioning things, but not closing yourself off to new ideas.
Exactly. Use your own judgment, your own reasoning. You have the power to sift through the noise and decide what you believe.
It's about being an active participant, not just passively accepting everything you're told. It's about asking those questions, searching for those answers wherever they might lead.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And who knows? Maybe someday the truth about the Dulce Base will finally come out. But until then, keep asking those questions, keep exploring, and never, ever lose that sense of wonder.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive, everyone. We'll see you next time for another fascinating exploration of the unknown. Until then, stay curious.